All right. How's everyone doing today? Hope everyone's doing well. There's a little bit of delay, so I just kind of wait here for a sec just to make sure it's working, but I hope everyone's having a great day. I'm super excited to be here doing this. And yeah, it's been a little while. Let me know if you guys can all hear me okay. Just kind of post your names in the chat. Just give me the thumbs up that you can hear me. It looks like it's working, hopefully. Let me see. I'm going to exit out of this, but put it in the chat though. I usually check on the page, but if you guys can hear me okay, put it in the chat and just let me know. That way I know, because it's really hard from my end to know if things are going well, honestly. So yeah, today's going to be an awesome lesson, and I'm super excited for that. And I'm going to be talking about essentially 4-step system that I use and just taught in the accelerator program to all the students there. Great. Oh, Alan, awesome. Good to see you, Alan. Bruce, awesome. Regis, thanks. Just taught in the accelerator program and have been teaching for a little while. And no problem, Jonathan. Hey, Teresa. Hey, Ray. Awesome. This is a great system. And one of the reasons I'm doing this and actually preparing for, and you guys are going to get a lot of improvisation education throughout this month, next month, leading up to Black Friday especially, and leading up to January, because in January I'm going to be releasing a brand new specialty course on improvisation. It's called Improvisation Mastery, Beginner to Pro, and everything in between. So this one's been a long in the works. I've been working on this, hey Paul, for a while now. I've been collecting feedback from you guys and gotten a lot of comments on what you guys need and want, and obviously like the main problematic areas of learning improvisation. Obviously I know from my career and things like that, but obviously helping the accelerator students for the past 6 months, about five to 6 months, give or take, has been really insightful for me on what people need, what's been successful, seeing their results and things like that. So, hey, Alfred, excuse me. And so yeah, I'm super excited about that. So the specialty course is going to be released in January. Obviously, if you're a lifetime member already, you'll get a chance to access that. It will be officially released in January, but you'll get a chance to reserve it for Black Friday. And I'll be doing a boot camp improvisation. Yeah, boot camp improvisation. That's going to be 2 weeks, and that will let you interact with me and learn about everything that's in the course. So it kind of goes hand in hand together. For the course, you're going to get to interact with me as I walk you through the different lessons. That's going to be 2 weeks long. Obviously, you'll have lifetime access to the material as well. So I'm super excited about that. The Black Friday offer will include tickets to or a reservation into the boot camp class, which is really awesome. The course and a lot more goodies, lifetime access, things like that. But anyway, let's jump to, by the way, go to jazzpianoschool.com/Black Friday 2022, jazzpianoschool.com/Black Friday 2022 to get on the VIP Black Friday offer list to hear more details about that. If you're already a lifetime member, don't even worry about going there, or a member, because you will get those details anyway when all that stuff's released, so on and so forth. So let's check the piano out here for you guys a little bit. Let me know if you guys can hear that okay, if the piano sounds good, if you need more volume, anything like that. Everything's sounding good. Just let me know in the chat if you guys can hear that okay. Just give me a little, yeah, piano sounds good. Sounds good. Alan, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys letting me know, because again, I really have no idea what's coming through on your end. So that's great. Great to hear. All right. If there are any problems that start happening, please let me know too. Sometimes the audio dips out because of streaming, but just let me know. Keep me informed in the chat. I'd really appreciate it. Awesome. So here's what improvisation is all about. Normally, when we go to learn improv, what we're doing for the most part is we're kind of learning lines. So let's say I could sit here and teach you something like this. Let's say that's the line, right? Whatever it is. You would take that and start to learn that lick, that line, right? And try to incorporate it in different ways, maybe over your F minor 7. Right? Let's say you go play it through the keys. For the most part, that's what teachers have us do. That's what educators have us do. And I truly believe that there is a time and a place for that. But what students need to understand, what I never understood and wish I got, is that we are trying to practice spontaneous execution of our hands, seeing changes, and then spontaneously playing around them when I see the changes. Like if I see a 2-5-1 in the key of F, I want to be able to create something on the spot and make it sound good. Let's say I do this. Again, I'm just improvising here. I'm just creating. If I go at that again, I can create something completely different. And I can do it again and create something completely different, right? That was a pretty cliche line though, so again, I apologize for that one. But essentially, every time we go at it, we're trying to practice spontaneity in playing a solo, right? That's ultimately our goal. So how do we do that? We mostly take lines and try to put them into tunes, and for the most part, that's going to fail because it's essentially not setting us up to practice spontaneity. So here's the 4-step system. What we're trying to do is go from our most controlled environment to the least controlled environment. Now, the least controlled environment being playing a tune and having just going through the changes and creating. That's ultimately our goal. Right? If we play a blues, right? I'm just simply creating. There's no pressure, anything like that. It's just flowing out of me. I'm not thinking, it's just happening. But we have to take certain simple steps to get up to that extremely volatile, uncontrolled environment. Now, I'm saying uncontrolled because it's uncontrolled because I don't know what's going to happen. That's the variable, is I'm trying to just execute improvisation. I don't know what's going to happen. So that's why it's so uncontrolled. Now, there are controlled variables, the changes, right? The tempo that we go at it. The chords will never change. The tempo, hopefully that doesn't change, right? But if you are playing with a metronome, obviously it'll shift back and forth, but it shouldn't change for the most part, right? Those things help, but how do we get to that point? Here's going to be the system. We have to start in the most controlled environment, So we need to take our tools, and I just filmed a whole bunch of videos on this in the improvisation mastery course that I'll be releasing. Let's say you're starting with something as simple as learning a color, right? And trying to connect chord tones with connecting notes through a 2-5-1. So what I always teach in the beginning when we're trying to improvise through a 2-5-1, for example, is targeting chord tones, using the connecting notes within the key that you're in this case, the key of C major, to connect my chord tones and land on chord tones when that chord changes. Now, obviously, it makes sense that the chord is producing the sound, so the chord tones are going to be the most reflective notes you can use to create the harmony that's intended by the composer or whatever's written in the tune. If I use these 4 notes, it's going to produce the note of the chord. It gets a little boring, it gets a little choppy. That's why we use connecting notes to connect the chord tones, but I'm always still focused on the chord tones, utilizing the key scale that I'm in. In this case, I'm in the key of C. So I'm going to use the notes from my C major scale. Right? So now, instead of being all choppy, I can go. Now, did you see how I still emphasized the chord tones on downbeats for the most part and was only using the non-chord tones, the glue notes I call them, as connecting notes? So we have E, G, and B as connecting notes, right? But I'm not focused on those. Check it out what would happen if I focused on the non-chord tones. Now, it sounds okay, particularly over this example, but let's check it out over the one chord. This is going to sound really funky, right? So here's my chord tones. Here's my non-chord tones. So if I were to solo over C major 7, focus on non-chord tones, that sounds pretty out. Doesn't sound that great. Doesn't really sound like jazz. Here's with my chord tones. So we're always focused on the chord tones no matter what, even when we have the connecting notes in there. Now the connecting notes, like I said, they allow us to move up and down the piano to connect our chord tones, the 4 most important notes that reflect the harmony. Now when this chord changes to a G7, my approach now shifts to these chord tones, right? So now I'm going D minor. Here's my new chord tone, right? And then I want to resolve into a chord tone of my next chord. Okay, so that's pretty all well and straightforward. And again, this particular lesson is going to be about systematic practicing of improvisation tools. This is a very beginner tool. This is where I start everyone. This is actually even more advanced than I would start in the improvisation mastery course, right? But I'm going to get into reharms, altered scales, any sort of tool for intermediate and advanced players, how to take it through the system I'm about to teach you in just a couple minutes, okay? So bear with me. So now I'm going really slowly through my connections. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and right now we need to land on a chord tone, so I'm going to land on the 7th. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So now this is a tool. This is an example of an improvisational learning tool or concept or approach, right? That needs to be learned, because when we start to get into more bebop stuff, this does not change. This doesn't change. You're still trying to focus on the chord tones. So if I start adding more complicated bebop approaches, right, like this, my goal is still the same. Every time that chord changes, I'm going to be landing on a chord tone for the most part, 99% of the time. Obviously, there's situational bases. There's ways to use extensions and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. Every time, no matter what, no matter how many advanced things I start to layer on to this fundamental, foundational concept, it'll always be there, and that's what's going to make your improvisation sound so good, right? Even if I start to go all over the place, I mean, no matter what, any color you're using, any sort of approach, thing like that, left-hand voicing, I'm still using this particular concept as a fundamental approach and foundation to my improv. So you can't start layering on bebop approaches without learning how to do this, okay? I'm digressing a little bit, but here's the system. Let's say you're at this particular level where you're learning how to connect, your chord tones, right? With the use of just the C major scale or the diatonic scale that you're in. In this case, we're in the key of C, so I'm using the C major scale to connect my chord tones. The step number one of the system, you need to start practicing in the most controlled environment possible. The most controlled environment possible. Now, for this particular tool, what that looks like is I'm going to play my left hand so I can hear the harmonies. The most controlled environment for an altered scale, I would only use my right hand, for example, to build a relationship with the scale. But in this case, I need to hear the harmonies of my chord, so I'm going to play my left hand. And I'm going to move up and down with no time, no pressure, just trying to land on chord tones, essentially on downbeats for the most part. And when that chord, when the beat comes back around to beat 1, I want to land on the same chord tones for my D minor 7. So I'm going to count to myself very slowly. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'm doing this very slowly. There's no tempo. I'm practicing extremely slow, meticulously, surgically, right? And working at this particular concept. Now, the only thing I'm really concerned about is when that beat comes around to beat 1. Everything in between, for the most part, you can get away with, but your main goal here is to hit a chord tone of the same chord, the D minor 7, when the beat comes back around. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, right on beat 4, you're trying to think ahead. How am I going to get to either the 5 or the 3rd? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So that's how I chose to do it that time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So I really had two options there based on diatonic movement, meaning using notes within the C major scale. If you had learned your bebop approaches and you were at that level, then you could start to apply some bebop approaches to get you into the next chord tone, which is going to make your sound like bebop. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Already the use of that half step below bebop approach, that would start to make your sound like bebop. But again, if you're at that level, great. This is exactly what you would be doing to incorporate bebop approaches. If you haven't learned your bebop approaches, that's not what you're worried about. You're not using that right now. So the most controlled environment right now, my goal is to practice to hit chord tones, right, with no time, no tempo, in the easiest environment possible. Now, let's say we want to ramp this up just a little bit. And again, our goal is always to go from most controlled to the least controlled, because least controlled is purely spontaneous execution of the philosophy, the approach, the tool that I'm working on in tunes. That's my ultimate goal. I just want to be able to improvise, right? Complete spontaneous creation in tunes. So we're always moving from most controlled to least controlled. But think about it. Just for a sec, I need to digress. If someone were to put you on a motorcycle and throw you on the highway, you had never ridden a motorcycle before, in a controlled environment, meaning in a parking lot, anything like that, what would happen? Probably wouldn't work out so well, would it? And unfortunately for students, for me, a lot of the improvisational journey, the path that starts to happen is that we're thrown on that motorcycle, we try to go on the highway, and we crash and burn, right? We fail because there's no way. You can't just be thrown into a completely uncontrollable, volatile environment where we're expected to just spontaneously improvise out of nowhere at a 120 BPM tempo. It just doesn't work like that. We need to sit on the motorcycle in the parking lot. We need to look at the gears. I used to ride a motorcycle, so I know. We need to look at the gears. We need to study. And it's a process. Like, I went through the whole process of learning how to ride a motorcycle, right? That's not that bad. I'd argue jazz piano is a little bit harder, but we need to see what the brake does, see what the clutch does. We need to slowly let the clutch out and not even do any gas yet. We're not trying to do gas and clutch at the same time, just letting the clutch out, bringing it back in, doing a little gas, and then turning it off. We need to do all these things separately, and finally we combine it. Finally, we start going around in the parking lot. We go in a straight line first, then we start to make some turns, then we brake, then we fast brake. It's all a building process. That's exactly what the system is. So most controlled environment. So now we need to connect, right? We need to up the environment a little bit. We need to get it a little bit simulate more of a real life situation. So now I'm going to throw a tempo on. I have my metronome right here. And I'm going to throw on, again, my tempo scale I always use within jazz piano school is 60, 90, 120, 180. So for me, let's just say for you, let's say you're going to start at 90. But again, if you're making mistakes, you need to bump the tempo down. But now it's a little bit pressured, right? We've simulated more of a tune type situation. So here we go. I'm still on one chord though, one chord. I'm not doing any comping. I'm just focused on my right hand. I'm just playing these chords for harmonies. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my downbeat. downbeat, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so when you get a little bit comfortable with that, you can continuously start to build your lines. Maybe you try to do all eighth notes. All right, here we go. I'll try continuous eighth notes, always landing on a chord tone on the downbeat. Still one chord, still not comping. Again, we're slowly trying to add pressure in uncontrolled environment, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah, I screwed up. So the goal is always to hit that chord tone, always on a downbeat and continuous eighth notes. That's going to be a lot harder than the ability to take space, right? So essentially step 2 of the system, step 1 is most controlled. No time, no tempo, very slow, no pressure. Step 2 of the improvisation system, practice system, is to now flip that metronome on, apply a little pressure with the simulation of a tune. Because when we go to improvise over a tune, guess what? Nothing's stopping. We cannot stop the time. We cannot go back. So we're simulating a real life situation now, right? That we're able to practice, but not completely in a tune yet. We're not there yet. We're not ready to go on the highway with our motorcycle yet, right? We're still kind of just driving in straight lines in the parking lot, but we're getting there. We're starting to understand what to do. So let's say I got this down now. I mean, you can bump the tempo and you guys can start to scale this however you want. Like, be creative. You can bump the tempo up. If I go to 120 now, this is going to be a little bit harder. It's up to you to create these variables for your environment to make little tweaks in the pressure. So I'm going to put this on 120 now. I won't do all eighth notes just yet because that'll be tricky. And wait till I get into all triplets or all 16th notes. Even for me, that is very, very difficult. So here we go. I'm still on one chord. I'm not even doing 3 chords yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Made a mistake. I hit a non-chord tone on a downbeat. I made a mistake, right? This is not easy. Now, obviously, you can make jumps and things like that. I was adding some space, da, da, ba, da, ba, da, 1, 2. I was playing quarter notes, things like that. But if I were to do all eighth notes, that's going to be a little variable. That's a notch up. We're always trying to make a notch up, right, for our uncontrolled environment. Here's triplets. Let me see if I can do triplets. 1, 2, triplet, 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 triplet. And so the thing here was I wasn't taking any space. Now you can approach different rhythms from 2 different ways. You can do continuous rhythms, which is going to be the hardest, or you can do slight rhythmic addition, meaning I can try and add triplets in a very minute way. That's going to be an easier step than what I just did, right? Always trying to tweak your variable just a little bit. So if I do just the addition, if I take a step back and do just the addition of triplets, I could do quarter, quarter, triplet, quarter, triplet, quarter, right? And break it up. Again, your goal is always the chord tone on the downbeat, all right? Now, this is getting pretty simulated, right? So we're at about step 2, a controlled environment. Okay, step 3 is to, again, ramp this up in a little bit more simulated environment that is edging us to playing a tune. Now, obviously, if we're playing a tune that's just a D minor chord, guess what? We're golden, right? We're pretty much golden at this point. But unfortunately, you know, besides some modal stuff, not many tunes have just a D minor chord. So what's the next best way that we can do and simulate? Well, step number 3 is I usually recommend putting this into some sort of progression. And again, I'm going to go through this whole system with another tool like a reharm or a altered scale or a half whole scale, some sort of tool, blues scale. But for now, we can start to connect progressions now. Because the 2-5-1, remember your 2-5-1s, we practice them because they're going to cover the most amount of progressions essentially in tunes. You'll see 2-5-1s all over the place. It's like 98% of all tunes. So I'm going to actually revert now. I'm going to pull my metronome off again because we're in step 3 now. We've even bumped the variable up just a notch by adding a progression. Already, that's going to be enough of an increase in our practicing to get us, my brain thinking and challenge us. We don't want to add brakes, gear, gas, highway all at one time. We want to add one component at a time. So now, no metronome, but progression. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'll go through this 10-15 minutes. Start to get comfortable with the transitions of the progression now. I can go a little bit faster. I'm trying to keep internal time so that when I put the metronome on, it's a little bit easier for me, right? 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so I'm starting to get used to this now. I'm like, okay, cool. This is going pretty well. What's the next step, right? So just to clarify, step 3 of the system, the practice system, is usually to add some sort of progression. Like I always recommend a 2-5-1, a 1-4-3-6, a 3-6-2-5-1. But step 3 of the system is to add some sort of progressions. Before, we're just working on one chord. So step 1 is completely no time, just learning, purely learning, getting our stuff used to it. Step 2 is going to be to flip the metronome on, start to apply a little pressure. No progressions yet, just one chord. Okay, and then step 3 will be progression based. But again, variation A of step 3, no time. Variation B of step 3, with time. Okay, so now I'm going to throw my metronome on. It's on 120. I'm still working at my progressions. 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3. Let me go a little slower. So I'm going to call out the chord tones for you guys here. Here's 90. 1, 2. So I'm going to start on the 5 of my D minor. We'll see where that takes me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Third. 5. Third. It's 1, root. 5. 7. 3. Okay? So I'm starting to get the hang of this. This is feeling good. Like that practice right there would probably be like, 15, 20 minutes until you're starting to feel comfortable, with that particular element. Let's bump it up to 120 now. Let me swing a little bit more. 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. I always repeat that one chord. Right? The 1, 3, 7. So now I'm really starting to improvise and flow through the harmonies of a 2-5-1, right? At this point, if your left hand is a whole ball game in itself, right? But if you set a backing track on and you want to pull your left hand out and play with the bass player and the drummer at this point, go for it. You could put a backing track on and just improvise in the same way I did. Let's say the backing track was on. I don't have it set up for you guys, but my tempo is clicking away. I don't know if you guys can hear this or not. Let's see if I can turn this up here. Right? And let's say you're working with Iro Pro just through your 2-5-1, just a continuous loop in Iro Pro 2-5-1 key of C. I would just keep going through this, right? Just try and improvise. 1, 2, 3, 4. right? I'm hitting all my chord tones. Things are feeling great. Cool. Now, it doesn't exactly sound like jazz yet because it's a very beginner exercise, right? You're really working on building a foundation. But guess what? This is your first playing benchmark as an improviser. And the benchmark before this, which is these benchmarks are in the improvisation mastery course, is just using chord tones to do what I just did. But now we're at a new level. So your benchmark is to be able to play through these 2-5-1s and eventually be able to hit all the chord tones of a tune. Now, let's say you go to a tune. Let's say you have a tune you're working on, right? Maybe Autumn Leaves. So Autumn Leaves actually starts out with a 2-5-1. So guess what? You're golden. You can actually start playing and improvise over the tunes because you've worked on that. You've worked on it in a controlled environment, a semi-uncontrolled environment, and then what we just did was pretty uncontrolled. Like we're moving to, again, the spontaneous creation of improvisation. So now it's time for tune integration. All right, this is step 4 is tune integration, right? So now, since I got my 2-5-1 down, obviously you need to do it through different keys because, if you're playing Autumn Leaves in the key of B flat, that 2-5-1, guess what? You're going to nail that 2-5-1 now because you've worked on it through these steps. So if I go throw my tempo on and I go to start playing Autumn Leaves, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to nail those changes, right? You're going to nail that 2-5-1. Now, just like I said, obviously Autumn Leaves goes 2-5-1-4, right? So there's other exercises, there's other drills to practice outside the tune that are going to prepare you to hit those other changes. But for the most part, this general fundamental rule, this is really kind of level 2 of an improviser playing benchmark, is to be able to move yourself through a tune using the correct chord scales of the key that you're in and hit those chord tones. So if I were to play through all of Autumn Leaves, my second level playing benchmark is to be able to build a solo, use the correct key scale as my connecting notes, and build that solo. So if I go through Autumn Leaves with my metronome on now, if you're new to this, I would start at 90, right? Or even 60. Let's try 90, okay? And I would just do always right hand alone at first, and then add your left hand in. Always right hand alone first by itself, right? So I'll do this, just try and picture the bass notes. I'll play some bass notes, picture them like Iro Pro, but here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. See? Right? Moving back and forth, hitting those chord tones on the downbeats. That's a playing benchmark for yourself, right? Once you've kind of hit that benchmark, it's time to go on to the next step and incorporate some new tools. That's all in the improvisation mastery course. Obviously, the next step, the path. But again, the system, let's take a new example for our system, right? Let's try to, a lot of people want to learn the altered scale or half whole scale. Hard to see around this mic. I got a new mic that's attaches to my shirt, but I'm kind of scared of using it, but it would help me see the keyboard a little bit better. Let's say you want to take the tool half whole. Ray says, is it okay to play any extra chromatic half note to assure chord tone on the downbeat? It is, Ray, but depending upon the point that you're at, right, you want to do that at the appropriate level. So the level I was demonstrating was without the use of any chromaticism. I did use a little bit of chromaticism when I was demonstrating Autumn Leaves. That was my mistake. Like I shouldn't be using, because the main goal is to move diatonically, just diatonically through Autumn Leaves, hitting chord tones and just using chord scale. So again, no chromaticism unless it's part of the major scale. Like an A natural to a B flat is part of the B flat major scale, right? So it's okay for me to use that. But to use a chromaticism into the root of my C minor or the root or the fifth of the F7, that wouldn't be allowed yet. If you're working on the half step below approach to incorporate into your improvisation, then yes, that's what you'd be working on. All right, let's go to that actually, Ray. That's a great question. So let's say you got that down. So now I can go through Autumn Leaves, 120, 150, I'm good, right? 1, 2, here's 120. Right? That's all diatonic. I was just using the B flat major scale and hitting chord tones. That's a great place to be at for an improviser. And not many students that I teach and, I see can even do that, right? That's a great playing benchmark for you. But let's say you want to go further now. Let's say you want to add bebop approaches. Let's say you want to add your half step below approach into your improvisation. Well, like I said, traditional education, most of the time teacher would say, okay, try and add your half step below approach into Autumn Leaves. So you go to Autumn Leaves. You're trying to add it. You're not doing a great job. You're like, man, why isn't this working? Well, you have to go and use the practice system that I'm teaching you today. Again, step number 1, most controlled environment. You have to introduce new elements in the most controlled environment for you possible. This is just purely a learning mode. I'm going to go back to the key of C. So now what I'm going to do is my goal is to use a half step below approach. That's the tool. That's the concept I'm introducing now into my improvisation. I'm going to use that half step below approach now every time the chord changes. Right? Now, obviously, we can use it at the beginning, at the end, in the middle. We're not there yet, though. We're just trying to use it when the chord changes, right? 1 and 2, and I'm just working this out. No time. I'm counting to myself. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? Now, let me see. I don't know where I'm going to go. I could go up. I could go down, and then I have to figure it out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right? So that's what I could have chosen there because I'm trying to incorporate that tool. Let's try another one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. There's my half step approach. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right? So I had to make a skip to get that half step approach in. So we're figuring this out mathematically. Bebop is all about kind of mathematical equations, essentially, like how to reach your destination with certain approaches, right? And so now, what's the next step? We want to get a little bit less controlled. So I have complete control over this, let's say, and I want to challenge myself a little bit in a less controlled environment. We're going to put some pressure on. The next step from this point on is to always throw the metronome on because your metronome, it doesn't lie. It's never going to stop. So again, at this point, I would choose like 60 BPM. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. I just targeted the same note, which is completely okay. I use the half step below approach each time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'll try it again. 4. Starting on the 7th. Half step. Half step. So cool. I'm starting to get used to my break on my motorcycle, right? I'm got it down, right? I'm playing with the metronome now. Obviously, we're doing the half step approach here. But again, I'm going to start to bump this tempo up a little bit, just a little. Like we can't go from 60 BPM to progressions just yet because you got to bump that tempo up. About 120 is really solid. I would always shoot for 120. Again, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. 60 is just starting. 90 is getting the hang of it. 120 is always, for the most part, a solid tempo. That means you can move on. Okay, so now, let's say I can do it at 120. Let me try this at 120. It's not the easiest thing to do, right? To figure this out. And it's challenging for me too because I'm isolating one bebop approach. Now, clearly in bebop, I have many bebop approaches at my disposal to get into a chord tone. So when you have more flexibility around that, it actually becomes much easier. But since I'm really constraining myself to using a half step below approach, It's actually a quite hard exercise. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. Right? So I screwed up on the first one. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What key were we in? Sorry. Right? And then we start to get a little faster. And if you want to challenge yourself, obviously, let me bump this up to 150. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So I'm pretty good now. I'm starting to feel comfortable. Obviously, taking it through different keys is going to be more challenging. Adding different types of voicings is going to be more challenging. That's always a good variable to add in if I want to add some rootless voicings. But remember, everything you do, every variable you do is going to affect your right hand, especially with your left hand. And when it does that, let's say I just completed the system at 150. Again, I'm not into progressions just yet. Now I'm swinging away. You guys heard it. I was swinging away, feeling good. But what was I doing with my left hand? Only downbeats, right? Any new variable is going to make it more challenging for you to actually complete this exercise in a tune. So now I just want to bump it up a little bit. Maybe I'll change my voicings now to rootless voicings. And I don't want to start at 150 now because I got a new variable. I got to pull the time back again. I can't just throw my rootless voicings at 150, right? It's like introducing, gear 3 on the highway. You got to introduce gear 3 on the back roads first and then be able to use it on the highway, right? So now I'm going to bump my tempo back, let's say to 90. And I'm going to comp freely with my left hand while still using my right hand half step below approach every time the chord changes. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'll hit some bass notes too. Right? So even for me, just that extra little variable, it did make it internally a little bit more tricky for me, right? So now we introduce progressions. I don't need to go through this whole thing again, but I'm sure you guys are getting the idea. But again, I would go into progressions now. So now clearly, I was doing progressions. I'm sorry. So you would take it from a one chord standpoint into progressions. We were at progressions at that point. And then again, I would start to integrate this now into a tune. So take your tunes, go to the spots where there's 2-5-1s in your tune, which there should be a lot of, start to integrate this now into autumn leaves. So I'm integrating my half step below approach into autumn leaves now at 90 BPM. And if you have a little bit of improv education around improvising over the other changes, you can let those be for the time being and just do whatever you know, right? And then just apply your technique or concept that you're working on over the 2-5-1s in the tune. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So every chord change I just played, I played a half step below into that note. That was my goal. That's the exercise I'm working on. I'm not just freely trying to improvise over autumn leaves. I'm trying to apply a specific tool that I'm working on in my improvisation now into a tune because I'm at that step. I've worked on it in the parking lot. I've worked on it on the back roads, and now it's time for the full simulation to integrate that and bring my motorcycle onto the highway because I've worked on it. I can now use the clutch, the brake, whatever on the highway, things like that. I don't know how to pop wheelies yet. I don't know how to do all that stuff, but I'm, not that I would, but. So this is kind of the process. Again, step 1, most controlled environment, one chord. Play around with your variables, the tempos. Let's take another example, okay? I'm going to give you guys one more example. Again, so many people go online, they find your altered scale or your half whole scale, right? But but Brendan, how do I take the scale and turn it into improv? How do I take scales and use that for improvisation? Here's how you do it. Again, number one, most controlled environment, learning. It's the learning step. You just have to learn the scale, build a relationship with the notes, okay? Here's a perfect example where I don't need to use my left hand because I can just hear the harmonies with my right hand. I don't need a harmonic backup, okay? I'm going to play this scale up and down in as many different ways as possible without a metronome on until my ears bleed, okay? You know, hopefully that doesn't happen, but you get the emphasis, the analogy. I want to learn the notes of this scale so well without any pressure in a controlled environment that I'm ready to move on to a less controlled environment, meaning my metronome, and play with it because I don't want to be guessing. I don't want to be guessing where my brake is. Can you imagine if you had to guess where the brake was on a motorcycle? Terrible idea. Spilling water all over myself. So now I'm just going to go up and down the scale. All I'm doing here is getting comfortable with it. Working out my fingering. Cool, I got it, okay? But obviously we don't want to use the scale within one register. When you change the register, it's going to completely change the variable, right? Changing registers is a big enough variable that's going to screw you up. Promise you. Try to play that scale in other registers. This is going to feel different than playing it here. Your eyes, your ears, there's a lot of intangibles that start to change. So you need to get as comfortable with this as possible. Go down here. Right? Go down here. Go to the super high end. Now, another variable that we're starting to learn is we're only starting from the root and going up to the root and going back down. What if I asked you to start the scale on the D flat? Guaranteed, a lot of you might not be able to do that either. If you had played the scale from C to C, you've learned the scale from C to C. It doesn't necessarily mean you've learned the scale from D flat to D flat, because you don't want to always just be able to improvise from C to C. You want to be able to improvise no matter what note you're starting on. So you have to incorporate that into your practice. Now I'll start to get comfortable D flat to D flat. You see this, where this is going? You're trying to introduce as many variables into your learning as possible. Now let's do E flat to E flat. This is already feeling different to me, even though I'm able to do it. It still feels different for me. I'm like, woo, this is not what I'm used to. By the 20th time, I'm like, okay, cool, I got this. This feels comfortable, right? Now I'm gonna keep going. Obviously, start to work on 2 octaves. Start from different notes. Start on the E natural. Cool. Step number 1. You've learned the notes, you've learned the scale, you've learned the tool. It's like being given a chainsaw, right? You've run it, you've worked it, you've wielded it, you've moved it around, you're pretty comfortable. It's time to put it into action. So what I want to start to do is, still in a controlled environment, start to improvise with the notes, from the scale. No time yet, no chord yet, just improvising with kind of some sort of... Now, obviously, depending upon your level and your ability, that's going to look a lot different to you than it does to me. But I still do this to this day to get more familiar with certain colors, atmospheres, techniques, tools for improvisation. Cool. I improvise. Let's throw some time in and start to simulate what it would be like to actually use this over our C7 chord, right? A half whole scale for a dominant chord. I'm going to throw my metronome on 90. Again, if 60 is a good starting point for you, go ahead and throw it on 60. Now I'm improvising with a little bit of time. I've stepped into that role of simulating a tune, but just a little bit. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. Obviously, that step is going to take a little bit more time for all of you. Again, you could spend a full day just on one of these steps. Depends how comfortable, how good you want to get at the improvisation with the particular tool that you're working on, right? So now I got that down. I'm going to bump my tempo just a little bit before I move into any sort of progressions. I got to test myself. I got to get to 120, make it sure it feels good. I'm using all the notes from the scale. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. I'm good on 120. Now, if you're not good at any of these steps, right, that means you need to work on them. Don't go to the next step yet before you actually feel comfortable. So what's our next step? Well, we've isolated the chord. We've isolated the scale. We've learned the scale. It's progression time, right? A little less uncomfortable, a little less controlled rather, because now we have to think about changes. We have to think about movements and changes. So that's going to be the new variable. Now, again, I'm going to remove my metronome. I'm going to work through a 2-5-1 now. Again, I always recommend 5-1 progressions or 2-5-1 progressions at step 3, okay, in this particular step. So I'm going to go 2-5-1, right? Just root position chords for me. So again, I'm introducing this tool over the 5 chord. So my goal is to use it now over the 5 chord. So what I'm going to be using up around the G minor and the F major 7 is just diatonic chord tones. What we were just doing in the last step, right? No time, internal time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm still hitting a chord tone on the F major 7, even though I'm now integrating my half whole over the C7, my goal is always to hit that chord tone at this level still, right? It's not until you're at very advanced where you can start to turn non-chord tones into resolutions. I might do that if I landed on the B natural, right? That's a much more advanced stage. Okay, we're not there yet. So here we go. Now I've gotten comfortable with this. Let me do it one more time. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. I integrated my half whole scale over the dominant chord. It sounded great. Cool. I hit that chord tone. Now I'm going to put a tempo on. I'm still doing my 2-5-1, not 120 though. I got to bump my tempo back down. Start slow. I'll start at 90. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Back around. All right, I stuck in a half step below approach there, but that was my bad. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, bump the tempo up, 120. Let's see how this sounds. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Used another half step below approach there. Actually, no, that was fine because within the key, diatonic. I'm still playing diatonic right now, not using half step below approaches. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. started to get a little fancy there. Obviously, I was challenging myself using some triplets. Now I can start to throw. Now I can actually go to tune integration if I want, or I can challenge myself more at this particular step with the 2-5-1 progression and add some better voicings in. Remember, your left hand changes the sound of your right hand immensely, right? So many people focus on the right hand for lines, licks, theoretical concepts, patterns, when all you need is better left-hand chords, voicings, and support or rhythmic things, right? So let me try this again now. And I'm going to throw some better harmonies in, some better movement, and it's completely going to change the sound of my improv for the better. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So already, man, that sounds like jazz. We're making some great music, okay? So clearly we have more progressions, more ways to work on this, but now we're actually at tune integration. Step 4, we can start to go to tunes. We can start to use the half-whole tool and concept that we've worked on in tunes now, and especially through 2-5-1s, right? And guess what? Dominant chords, like a lot of dominant chords will be out on their own in tunes. Like it'll be a dominant chord there. And so the more you get comfortable with that particular tool and tools in general, you can start to use those in more ways. Now, obviously, I've only showed you a C half-whole scale. Let's say you wanted to play your F half-whole scale, your B-flat half-whole scale, because over a B-flat set, there's a B-flat 7 chord in the tune you're playing. Well, clearly, you got to go through those steps that I've been showing you today. Controlled environment, right? Add the metronome on. A little bit less controlled environment. Throw it in some progressions. Go through the metronomic, bump up where we go from 60, 90, 120 at every single level. And then finally, you can start to integrate that into your tune. And I promise you, it'll be like magic. You'll be like, wow, this is actually working in the tune. When you take an improvisational concept or tool or thing you're working on, and by the way, most of us don't even know what to work on. We don't know our improvisational tools. We don't know what they are. We don't know what we can add to grasp those extra amazing elements that elevate the sound of our improvisation. Most students don't even know what they should be working on, what the tools are. But when we know what the tools are, when we know the system, the 4-step system that I use and work with and teach my students, right? It opens up so many doors because you've worked on it so much. When you get to the tune, you don't need to work on it really in the tune anymore. It just comes out naturally. You've already garnered and worked on the art of spontaneity outside the tune. So when the tune does come, you're prepared. When that chord change does come, you're prepared, right? When that weird progression comes, you're prepared. So you can now use anything you want in a tune as long as you kind of work it through these steps. And it's a process for sure, but it sets you up for success. It sets you up to achieve the sound, the results you want from your playing, rather than just going in circles, wasting time, months, years, not making any progress, which is what I did and most students do as well. And done. No, just kidding. Does anyone have any questions? I haven't seen any chat. I hope people are still here. Any comments, any questions on anything that I just explained? Let me cut this out real quick. You guys still there? Trying to pull up the actual YouTube page here. I know there's a little bit of delay, but let me see here. Let me see. Cool. Yeah, we're still going. We're still going. Yeah, definitely, Alan. Awesome. Great. Regis, awesome. Great. Fantastic session. Now I have to look up several old podcasts. Great to hear, Ray. That's great. Yeah, most of the time, I mean, with improv, we don't usually have a plan, you know? And like the email that I sent, I've heard a lot of different explanations from teachers. Just listen, just feel it, just transcribe. Those, unfortunately, those are very nebulous and generic ways to learn improv. It's not focused much on anything. And it's kind of like a pin the tail on the donkey thing. Like, you might get better, probably not, but there's no path, there's no plan. It's just a complete guessing game. And so really utilizing and looking at tools in improvisation and a path to get better is going to help you make tremendous progress in a short amount of time. Cool. Good to know, Regis. Yeah, so you can apply these. I mean, use this particular system for any tools online. So the way you can use this, obviously, check out the improvisation mastery course that I'll be releasing, beginner to pro and everything in between. And the boot camp that I'm going to be doing. That'll be a limited amount of space, though, because it is going to be a Zoom session that will be 2 weeks long with me. So you'll be Zooming with me, asking questions. I'll be teaching you guys through that. Sandra said, I noticed you do some very quick patterns during your improv. Could you show a few? Sure, Sander. If you could give me a little bit more info about the patterns. I don't really know what patterns I played, to be honest with you. I wish I could remember. Whoops. I shut down my MIDI by accident here. But yeah, if you can kind of tell me, were they like chromatic or triadic? Mostly for 251 stuff. It might have been thirds. Trills. Okay, yeah, trills for sure. So I call these ornaments in JPS, and these are great, really great flourishes. They're like spices. A great question, Sander. And so these will add like elegance to your playing in so many different ways. So these are the coolest thing ever. Once I discovered these, I was like, oh my God, this secret is amazing. I started adding them in everywhere. So let me see if I can get a good example here. If I were to play a line like over a dominant chord, right? What I can do is start to add some trills or 16th notes. You can do this with 16th. So 1E and a 2. So I could go. I actually changed the line so I could fit the trill a little bit better, but so 1E and a 2, or I can use a triplet ornament too. So I could go triplet 1. Let's forget that passing note I added in. This will be a little bit better. So triplet, right? Or I can go. So there's all these types of kind of ornamental things you can do, and that's just it. Or so if I could go any sort of ornamental process, and you'll add them in to eighth note lines. So that's going to be too long to give an example. So instead of going, that's a short Lego building block approach. This would be a bebop approach, right? So chord scale above, half step below into my root. To make it give it more flair, give it more spice, more elegance, I add a triplet ornament around that. So, right? Or, so you'll need to change the bebop approach slightly. Like instead of going, right, I'm going to go, right? Or so triplet da da da, or triplet da dee da, or da 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 da. That's going to be your 16th note ornament. So right? So instead of just going triplet, right? You'll hear this all the time. Clifford Brown is like the king. If you look at some Clifford Brown transcriptions, he's adding these little cool trumpet ornaments all over the place. That's really actually where I got a lot of this. I started integrating a lot of this from him. No one really taught me. And then when I created Jazz Piano School, I was like, oh man, people need to know about these ornamental things because they really spice up lines. So if you're at a point where you're just going, let's take that line right there. Right? Here's the basic line by itself. How would we ornamentize that, right? So, you could do that, or right? Or right? So you're just kind of looking for different ways to kind of add these ornamental sounds in. Right. So that was my 16th note. 1, and a 2 and 3. Right? Oscar Peterson, all these rhythmic little accents, right? Again, instead of just going, it takes a lot of time to kind of practice that and get them in, but essentially that's what those are, Sander. It's just these little 16th note trills, triplet trills that kind of, add themselves into improv. So, any other questions about any of this that I can help you guys with? Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, this has been a fun session. Thanks so much for being here. So again, through kind of November and December, especially leading up to Black Friday, I'll be doing a lot more of these. So just kind of explaining, talking about the improvisation mastery course, doing a lot of, giving a lot of free lessons, content, things like that, trying to explain the system, just kind of put it out there a little bit more so people are aware of it, obviously, so you can learn more about the journey and my philosophical approach to taking a step-by-step path for improvising, learning how to become a pro improviser. Because again, through the years that I had to go through of it, all that stuff, it was like a guessing game to me. And after reflecting, looking back, and being in education, jazz piano for so long, I realized that I teach in a certain way and system through all the time, and so I'm going to be teaching everyone that. That's what the course is going to be. Reggie says, or Regis, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. How would I implement the whole half step? So yeah, if you're working on the bebop approach, which is chord scale above, I think you're talking about, to half step below, right? The first thing is you're going to want to practice these half steps around the chord tones to your chords. So let's say you're just working on it, again, with one chord, just your D minor 7. You're going to want to practice around your chord tones. Back down. Okay, you got that down? Cool. Obviously, you're going to want to do that for all keys, right? Because you want to be able to not just play your D minor 7, but G minor 7. Right? But don't move on and practice all. I mean, you can if you want to, but a great way to kind of just start to use these real quickly is no time, right? No metronome. Start to build lines around the bebop approach. So start your line off. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Target a chord tone on beat 1. Then try a different one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? And 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Just start to use the bebop approach at the beginning of the line, and then try coming down too. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Then you can use a half step below approach if you want at the ends of them. Right? You're already starting to create some bebop movements here. There's no time yet. Flip that metronome on, just like I showed you throughout the lesson. Put a little pressure on yourself. 90, 60 BPM, 90 BPM. Don't get too carried away though, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And then you can throw one at the end of the line too if you want. And they can go both ways. So you can go chord scale above, half step below, or you can go the other way. So I could go. So you're already starting to implement bebop movement. Now, obviously, the next step, like I said, get comfortable with that at tempos, 90, 120, move into progressions now, right? So now we go from D minor 7 to our 2-5, right? Now we're having to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, right? Not the best example, but you get the picture. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and again, the use of a specific approach is difficult because there's a lot of different bebop approaches that allow you to get into chord tones. For example, here, that's a very common one, but that's not our goal right now. So we're trying not to use that, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Get comfortable with that. Move through your 2-5-1s, bump the tempo up, put it into a tune, start to play through that with the use of those in a tune. Cool. All right, guys. I think that's it for me. I got a lot of more videos to film, more things to do. I got a gig later too. So hope you guys all had a great time. Thanks so much for being here. If you guys have any questions, follow-up questions, this will be live on the YouTube channel. I always put them live on the YouTube channel, or not live, it's live now, but it'll be on the YouTube channel. If you want to revisit it at any point, you can do that. Also send it out to the, if you're a subscriber on the email list too, I'll send out a replay to it so you can watch it whenever you want. Okay. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. That was super fun to do for you guys. I'm going to do a whole bunch more. Just be on the lookout in your inbox, and I'll see you guys soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.